own guard abandoned the wounded queen. One human medic stayed. I have a rule about wounds. Not a medical rule. Those I know by rote, the way a man knows his own heartbeat. I mean a different kind of rule. The kind you build out of bad luck and repetition over years, and across too many operating theaters. The kind that becomes so thoroughly part of you that you stop thinking of it as a rule at all, and start thinking of it simply as true. The rule is this. The wound tells you the truth about a person. Not what they claim to be, not what rank is stitched to their collar, not what the briefing says about their unit, or their title, or their political significance. The wound. The way they hold still for the needle, or don't. The way they breathe when the pain is bad. Whether they curse, or go quiet, or try to bargain. With you, with the pain, with whatever they believe in. The way they look at you, or refuse to. I've been practicing battlefield medicine for 11 years. I came to it late. I was a structural engineer for the first 7 years, after my graduate degree. And I tell you this only because the engineering background turns out to be more useful in field medicine than most people expect. You are always making structural assessments. Is this load-bearing? Can this wall take another hour? What is the minimum intervention that keeps this from collapsing? The questions are the same. The material is different. Treated humans on 3 continents and 4 orbital stations. I've treated Corps the soldiers, who wept openly for reasons that had nothing to do with pain, and everything to do with the particular grief of survivors. And I've treated Tenari enlisted, who didn't make a sound through procedures that would have broken most humans I know, and I've learned to read all of it without imposing my own culture's ideas about what stoicism is supposed to look like. Pain is pain. The wound is the wound. The rest is translation. I thought I had seen everything a wound could tell me. I was wrong. But I didn't know that yet on the morning the Queen's Guard left her in my bunker and ran. The war had been going 6 weeks. That's not long by the scale the Dominion fights. The Valari Dominion had been expanding its outer boundary for 2 centuries by our calendar, absorbing smaller civilizations in what their diplomatic corps called harmonization, which was a clean word for a thing that was not clean at all. Humanity had been watching from the edge of Dominion space for 40 years. Careful, tentative, signing trade agreements and non-interference pacts, and generally keeping our collective head down. We were good at that. Earth governments had long practice in looking the other way. 40 years of careful watching ends when a Dominion battle group drops out of transit 17,000 kilometers from the joint human Korvathi colony at Drivast Station, and the first broadcast the colony receives is not a diplomatic greeting. 6 weeks after that, I was stationed at Forward Aid, Post Kethrick 7, a cargo depot at the base of the Ossivar Escarpment, 40 kilometers from the nearest active front. We called it a forward post. By any honest assessment, it was a collection of prefabricated panels, 2 surgical bays, a generator that needed coaxing every morning, and approximately 600 square meters of compressed gravel pretending to be a floor. It smelled of antiseptic and burnt composite, and on certain days when the wind came off the escarpment wrong, something organic I had chosen not to identify. I was Captain Solon Adra, Senior Medical Officer, which in practice meant I was the only medical officer, because Lieutenant Voss had been medevaced to the orbital carrier 3 days prior, with a shrapnel puncture to the lung that I had patched well enough for transport, but not well enough for another week of field work. That left me with 2 capable medic techs named Prat and Isol, a supply manifest that was optimistic about suture thread and deeply pessimistic about analgesics, and a patient roster of 41 that fluctuated daily. The morning it happened, the roster was at 38. It started as a sound. This is the thing about war, that people who've only read about it never quite understand. Most of it is sound before it is sight. You hear the war before you see it. You hear the change in the fighting before any report reaches you. That morning, I was in the 2nd bay, redressing a Korvathi sergeant's shoulder wound, when I heard the guns change register. Not louder. Different frequency, a different cadence. As though the battle to the north had shifted not in scale but in character. Prat put her head through the partition. Captain, comms are down. All of them. Interference? Doesn't read as interference, she paused. It reads as jamming. I finished the dressing, told the sergeant to stay put, and went to the entrance of the bay. Outside, the sky over the escarpment had acquired a color I had not seen before. Not the flat gray of overcast, not the orange bruise of an artillery exchange. Something between deep amber and rust, a haze that moved with too much intention to be weather. I had read about Velari atmospheric suppression munitions in the briefings. I had read about them the way you read about a disease in a textbook, abstractly, with the comfortable belief that it describes something that happens elsewhere. Get the ambulatory patients to the secondary structure, I said. The serious cases don't move unless the roof comes down. Pratt went, shh. Weisel appeared at my shoulder, having apparently materialized from nowhere in the way that good medic techs do when things go wrong. Fecals, I said. 3, 2 are fueled. 1's on blocks. Right. I was going to say something else, but that was when the first group of soldiers came over the ridge. They were running. Not the disciplined withdrawal of a unit falling back to a prepared position. Running. And I saw it immediately. The way the formation had dissolved, every figure independent, not checking flanks, not covering each other. I counted 9, then 12, then more, spilling over the ridgeline in no pattern I recognized as tactical. Behind them, over the ridge, that amber haze thickened into something definitive. I stayed where I was. Running soldiers will sometimes run straight through a forward post and keep going. And there is nothing to be done about that. What I needed to see was whether any of them would stop. 4 stopped. 3 were walking wounded. I could see the way they held their arms, the telltale bracket of a man carrying pain in his shoulder. 4th was not a soldier at all. She was being carried. 2 Corvathi soldiers had had her between them, supporting her weight, her arms over their shoulders. She was taller than both of them, which made the arrangement awkward. She wore armor, not standard issue Corvathi, not anything from our Allied forces inventory. It was layered plate in a deep greenish black, ornate in a way that combat armor has no business being, with engraved channels along the pauldrons that caught even the strange amber light and returned it as a faint iridescence. Of the pauldrons was missing. In its place was a pressure bandage, badly applied, already soaked through. Skin was deep teal, the particular dense pigment of the Velari restorationist caste, which I had only seen in photographs before that morning. Her hair was cropped close to her skull, silver white at the temples, darker at the crown. Her eyes were open. That was what struck me. She was being half carried across gravel by 2 strangers, and her eyes were open and tracking. And what they were tracking was me. The taller of the 2 Corvathi called out in his own language, then switched to the trade tongue when he saw my face. She needs a medic. She was behind our lines when the advance came. Her escort was killed. Bring her in, I said. I held the partition back for them. In the light of the surgical bay, I could see her more clearly. She was not young. This is not a criticism. It is an observation relevant to treatment. She was somewhere in her 4th decade, by Velari reckoning, which according to the briefings, placed her developmental stage analogous to a human in their mid to late 30s. There were faint lines at the corners of her eyes, the kind that come from years of expression and not from carelessness. Jaw was against the pain with a precision that told me she had some practice at it. The wound at the shoulder was a plasma burn, deep with a secondary thermal injury extending to the clavicle region. Bad. Not unsurvivable, but bad enough that the fact she was conscious was a better sign than I had any right to expect. Blood pressure was low. I got the cuff on her within 30 seconds of getting her onto the table, and her pulse was irregular in a way I did not immediately like. Does she speak trade tongue? I said to the Corvathi soldier. She speaks it, she said herself, in trade tongue, without moving her jaw more than necessary. Good. I'm Captain Solanadra, forward medical officer for this post. I need to treat the burn at your shoulder, and I need to start a line for fluids. Is there any reason I should know about before I proceed? Any contraindicants, any allergy equivalent, anything in your biology that would complicate treatment? She looked at me for a moment. It was a measuring look, and I recognized it. I had received it from patients of a dozen species. The question behind the look is always the same question. Are you someone I should trust with this? No contraindications, she said. Proceed. I proceeded. It took 40 minutes. Burn was third-degree equivalent across approximately 80 square centimeters of the shoulder and upper chest. I debrided it, which was unpleasant for both of us. And I made no apologies for the unpleasantness because an apology in that situation is a way of making the person doing the treating feel better, and it costs the patient something, and she had already paid enough. I packed it with what I had, which was not ideal. Our dressings were good. Our silver fiber composites were good, but the biofoam that would have been ideal for a burn of that depth was low on the supply manifest, had been low for a week, and the resupply request I'd filed 4 days prior had apparently been absorbed by the same administrative void that had eaten several of my previous requests. I applied the best dressing the manifest could offer. The secondary thermal injury to the clavicle was less severe than I had initially feared. The armor had absorbed the majority of the energy on that side, which was the one solid piece of good news in an otherwise difficult 40 minutes. She did not make a sound through any of it. This is the thing I said earlier. The wound tells you the truth. She was in significant pain, facing in her breathing, in the controlled tension of every muscle she could keep still while I worked, in the fine sheen of exertion on her skin. She held still through all of it. Not with the mechanical blank smoothness of someone dissociating, not with the rigid over-controlled quality of someone performing toughness for an audience. She held still the way a person holds still when they have made a specific and conscious decision to endure something and have fully committed to that decision. With intention, with something that felt, from where I stood, like a considered and personal choice that had nothing to do with me and everything to do with who she was. When I was done and reached for the analgesic applicator, she stopped me. Not that, she said. It's going to hurt considerably for the next several hours. I know. A pause. Need to think clearly. I looked at her. She met my eyes without flinching. All right, I said, and set the applicator down, hooked the fluid line, and started the drip, adjusted the rate, and checked her pressure again. It was climbing. Still low but climbing, her pulse was steadying. I pulled a stool close and sat down. Outside, the sound of the guns had changed again. Farther away now, or different, I couldn't be sure. The amber in the sky was still there when I glanced through the narrow window. I don't have your name, I said. It was quiet for a moment. Varessa, she said. Varessa Quell. I wrote it on the intake form. Is there anyone we should contact? A unit you're attached to, a command element. The escort detail that was with me is dead, she said. The command element I was traveling to meet may also be dead. I do not yet know. What were you doing this far forward? She turned her head toward me slightly. The movement cost her something. I saw it, and she absorbed the cost without comment. Negotiating, she said. With our side or with theirs? With yours. Another pause, longer. Was the voice of the restorationist faction in the Dominion's Continuity Council. I have been attempting to bring a formal ceasefire proposal to the Coalition Command. There are those within the Dominion who do not want the war to continue. There are also those who do. She looked at the ceiling. The ones who do not want the war to continue are currently losing the argument by a margin I would describe as significant. I sat with that for a moment. The jamming, I said. The Continuity Council's war faction has been aware of my movements for some time, she said. I believe the operational advance this morning was not entirely unrelated to my presence in this sector. They targeted this position to stop you from reaching Coalition Command. I believe so, yes. I stood up and went to the window. The amber had thinned slightly, or perhaps I was only hoping it had. Out on the gravel, the 2 Corvathi soldiers who had brought her in were gone. I hadn't noticed them leave. Most of the walking wounded had moved to the secondary structure. Post was very quiet in a way that felt less like calm and more like held breath. What happens, I said, if you reach Coalition Command? I carry formal credentials and a transmission key that the Council's war faction does not know I have, she said. With it, the coalition can verify my standing and open a direct line to the Restorationist caucus. A ceasefire becomes possible, a very dry pause. Without it, the war continues for some years and a considerable number of people on multiple sides die. That's a significant variable to be carrying around a battlefield. I am aware. I turned back from the window. Can you move? She considered this seriously. Not quickly, not what I asked. Yes, she said. Can move. Then we have a problem I need to think through, I said. Because this post is going to become untenable in the next few hours, and I have 38 patients and 2 medic techs, and I need to figure out which of those problems I can solve. The next 3 hours were a kind of controlled disaster. The advance did not reach us directly. The Volari ground forces appeared to be pushing north-northwest, not south, which meant we were in the flank rather than the path. The jamming held, which meant I had no communication with anyone at all. Not Coalition Command, not the carrier, not the rally point to the south. The amber suppression layer continued to put anything airborne at risk, which meant medevac was unavailable, which meant the carrier's surgical team was as inaccessible as if it had been on the other side of the planet. By midday, I had gotten 24 ambulatory patients moving toward the secondary rally point, 3 kilometers south, with USAL guiding them. Prat stayed with me for the 14 non-ambulatory cases in the main bay. I distributed water, checked dressings, talked to 3 patients, who were frightened enough that talking was more useful than medicine, and tried not to calculate the variables too, precisely because precision in a situation like that is mostly just a more specific kind of anxiety. Vanessa Quell stayed in the surgical bay. I checked on her every 30 minutes. She was sitting up by the second check, which she should not have been, and I told her so. I am reviewing documents, she said, indicating a small data tablet she had apparently produced from somewhere inside her ruined armor. You have a plasma burn equivalent to roughly a third of your shoulder. Sitting up is going to. I am reviewing documents, she said again, with a quiet finality that was not rudeness exactly, but was not a request for further input either. It was the tone of someone who has made a decision about priorities and has no particular interest in revisiting it. I left her to it. At the 3rd hour, one of my non-ambulatory cases, a young Corvathi private named Desoth, who had taken shrapnel to the thigh 4 days prior, spiked a fever that I did not like the character of. I spent 45 minutes managing that, and came out the other end, reasonably confident it was not the worst case. But it ate time I didn't have, and left me with a particular low-grade dread at the back of my skull that I had long since learned to ignore. At the 4th hour, a Volari patrol came through. I heard them before I saw them. Boots on gravel, and a particular sound. A low harmonic, which I later learned was the field resonance of Volari detection equipment. They came in through the main entrance of the cargo depot, 6 of them, in the dark composite armor of the war faction's forward units, and they stopped when they saw me. I was standing between them and the partition to the surgical bay. I had no weapon. This was not an oversight. I carried no weapon by policy, because I had learned long ago that a medic with a weapon stops being a medic in the eyes of the people who want to shoot at medics. It had seemed like a good principle until approximately this moment. The lead soldier said something in Volari. I did not speak Volari. I spread my hands and showed them the medic's patch on my sleeve. The lead soldier said something else. One of the others moved toward the partition. I stepped sideways and put myself in front of the other soldier. Not aggressively. I want to be accurate about this. I stepped into the space because that space needed to be occupied, and I was the only one available to occupy it. Psst. The soldier stopped. Happen next took approximately 2 seconds, and I was not, I will admit, fully tracking all of it. Partition opened from the other side. Vanessa Quell stood in the doorway. She was upright. She was holding the data tablet in her left hand, extended slightly, angled so its display was visible. On the display was something I could not read. Volari characters. But the lead soldier's reaction was immediate and legible across any language barrier. His spine straightened. His chin came up. He looked at the tablet and then at her face, and then at the tablet again. She said something in Velari. 3 sentences, short, measured. The voice she used was not the same voice that had said, "I am reviewing documents." It was the same tone. Precise, unhurried, without theatrical weight. But it carried in those 3 sentences something that made all 6 of those soldiers absolutely still. The lead soldier's hand came up. A gesture I did not recognize, but I recognized its character. It was the kind of gesture people make when they are acknowledging something larger than themselves. He spoke, briefly. She answered briefly. He turned his head and said something to his unit, and they moved. Not toward us, toward the exit. In 30 seconds they were gone. The gravel crunched, then silence. Varessa Quell stood in the doorway of the surgical bay and gripped the frame with her right hand, and I could see that the grip was not decorative. I crossed the bay in 4 steps and got my shoulder under her arm before she had to ask. "Bed," I said. "Yes," she said. "Bed." I got her back to the table. She sat on the edge of it. And, for the first time since she had arrived, she looked at something other than forward. "Credentials," I said. "The transmission key." She set the tablet down carefully. I showed them what I am. The lead unit commander was uncertain enough to stand down. A pause. For now, they will report upward. The war faction will know my location within hours." She looked at her hands. "The ceasefire proposal requires that I reach Coalition Command alive, and with the transmission key intact. If the war faction reaches me first, they will take the key, and I will not be alive. That's very direct." "I find directness efficient," she said. I refastened the dressing on her shoulder, which had shifted when she stood. She held still. "Troll gave us a window," I said. "Maybe 4 hours before the next element arrives. I have 2 fueled vehicles. One of my non-ambulatory patients can be moved with care. The others I'll have to." I stopped. "You'll have to leave them," she said. "No," I said, "I won't." She looked at me directly. This was, I realized later, the first time she had done that without calculation behind it, without the assessment, without the measuring. Just looked. "You could take 1 vehicle," she said. "Get me to Coalition Command. The war ends sooner. Fewer people die overall." "I understand the math," I said. But I don't leave patients," I said. "It's not philosophy. It's not calculation. It's just what I do, and what I don't do. And I've been doing it long enough that there isn't a version of me that does otherwise." She was quiet for what felt like a long time. "Can you do?" she said. It was not a challenge. It was a real question. "I can get all 14 mobile within 4 hours if I'm willing to make them uncomfortable," I said. "The suppression layer won't affect ground vehicles. If I can get everyone into the 2 vehicles and get you to the secondary rally point, I can arrange onward transport to command from there. Coalition forces have a holding position 12 kilometers south of the rally point. It's slower, it's harder, but nobody gets left." She looked at the tablet, then at me. "Show me what help looks like," she said. "I will do what I can." She could, it turned out, do quite a lot with 1 working arm and a data tablet and 3 hours of focused effort. The Velari medical anatomy was different from Korvathi, and different again from human, but the principles were not. She helped me talk the worst-case patients through movement, using the tablet to translate when I needed it. And her presence, the steadiness of her, seemed to matter to the Korvathi wounded in ways I didn't fully understand and didn't need to. At one point, when I was attempting to safely move a sergeant who had a fractured pelvis and a very strong opinion about remaining stationary, she said something to him in Korvathi. I didn't catch it. He looked at her. Then he breathed out carefully and said something back, and allowed himself to be moved. "Did you tell him?" I asked. "I told him the person asking him to move was one of the most stubborn men I had yet encountered in this war," she said, "and that I expected he'd feel the same way about giving in, which meant they were approximately matched." "That worked? He is moving, is he not?" He was. We got everyone into the vehicles with 11 minutes to spare by my estimate, which was not a margin I would have chosen, but was the margin we had. Pratt drove the first vehicle. I drove the second, with Vajessa in the passenger position, and 3 patients in the back. The ride south was 3 kilometers of bad gravel road, in deteriorating visibility, and I did not talk much, because I was watching the road and watching the sky in equal measure. At some point, Veressa said very quietly, "The patient behind us. His pressure is dropping." I handed her the portable monitor without taking my eyes off the road. "Tell me the number," she told me. It was low. I talked her through what to do, step by step, and she did it, and the number came back up. "You've done that before," I said. "My mother was a field physician," she said. "Before she became a political figure, and then before I became one, she taught me what she could." We pulled into the secondary rally point with all 14 patients, all of them alive. The coalition holding position was 12 kilometers further, and a runner from the rally point got there faster than we did on foot, which meant there was an escort waiting when we arrived. 2 vehicles, a sergeant, who seemed confused by the composition of our group, and a junior communications officer, who kept looking at Veressa as though trying to place her face. I gave the sergeant my patient roster, and he went pale in the way that officers go pale when they realize how much work is in front of them. "Get my patients inside," I said. "Triage in order of the numbers on the roster. Pelvis fracture is first." "Yes, Captain." He looked at Veressa again. "She needs a direct line to Coalition Command," I said. "Highest priority." "What's her designation?" Veressa spoke from behind me. "Tell your commanding officer that the continuity voice of the Restorationist faction is requesting emergency contact authorization under Treaty Protocol 7, and that she is carrying a valid transmission key." The sergeant stared. "Now would be useful," she said. He went at something approaching a run. They got her a line within 20 minutes. I stayed with my patients because that was where I needed to be. But I could hear the conversation happening in the adjacent module. Fragments of it. The tong portions. Veressa's measured voice alternating with a human general's voice that kept rising in pitch in a way that I read as stunned. 40 minutes later, she came and found me. I was finishing the dressing on the pelvis fracture, who had stopped arguing and was sleeping, which was the best possible outcome. Veressa stood in the doorway, and I looked up. Left arm was in a sling that the coalition medics had apparently provided. She was still in the remnants of the ornate armor over the right side, the scorched pauldronless shoulder, the bandaging visible at the neck. She looked exhausted in a very fundamental way, the kind of exhaustion that has been held at bay through discipline and has now been allowed to arrive. "The Coalition Command will transmit the ceasefire framework to Restorationist caucus representatives within 8 hours, she said. "There are no guarantees the war faction will contest it, but the channel is open." A pause. "The channel has been closed for 11 months. Now it is open." "Good," I said. She looked at me for a moment. The measuring quality was back, but it was different now. Not assessment, not calculation. Something that felt more like trying to understand something she had encountered that she did not have a prior category for. "You didn't leave," she said. It wasn't a question, but it wasn't quite a statement either. It was the kind of thing you say when you have become accustomed to a pattern, and something has interrupted it. "I told you I wouldn't," I said. "People say a great many things," she said. I didn't have an answer for that, so I didn't offer one. I finished the dressing, checked the sergeant's vitals, and stood up. "The ceasefire," I said, "if it goes through, what happens to you?" "That depends a great deal on who wins the internal argument within the Dominion," she said. "Shh. I have made myself politically inconvenient to a significant number of powerful people today. That is not a new experience, but the stakes are somewhat higher than usual." She paused. "I will likely be recalled to the council. There will be proceedings. I have documents that will be useful in those proceedings. And if the war faction wins the argument, then the ceasefire does not hold, and the war continues," she said quietly. "And I imagine my situation becomes considerably more difficult. Then I hope the Restorationists win." "So do I," she said. Very brief pause. "Captain Adra, Solon," I said. She looked at me. In the light of the medical module, she looked less like a diplomatic abstraction and more like a person. A very tired, injured person who had done something difficult over an extended period and was now, briefly, still. "Solon," she said. like she was placing the word somewhere specific. Why what? Why did you stay? And do not give me the answer you gave before. I understand the principle. I am asking about the particular instance. Q. You were presented with a calculation. By any reasonable assessment, the lives of 14 injured soldiers weigh less on the galactical scale than a ceasefire affecting 9 inhabited systems. The mathematics were clear. I know. So. I looked at the sleeping sergeant, and at Pratt through the window partition, and at the door through which the rest of my patients were being managed. Because they were there, I said, and I was there. And there isn't a scale that makes a person in front of you weigh less than a person in theory. I looked back at her. The math is real. I understand the math. If you want a medic who leaves patients to run the numbers, you need a different medic. She was quiet for a long time. There is a word in Old Valari, she said, finally. Vethakar. It has no exact trade tongue equivalent. The closest rendering would be something like, a person whose presence makes the correct action possible. Not a leader, not a symbol, just a person who stands in the right place at the right time and makes a thing happen that could not have happened without them being exactly what they are, exactly where they are. I didn't say anything. I have been in this war for 11 months, she said. I have been called by many things. That word has not been among them until today. The way she said it, it was quiet and precise, without flourish, the same voice she had used for everything. For proceed. For to think clearly, for the 3 sentences that had stopped 6 armed soldiers in their tracks. Just the word and its meaning, placed carefully in front of me. I held onto it. You should sleep, I said. The shoulder is going to make the next 2 days difficult, and sleep is the only advantage you can give yourself, right now. I am aware, she said. She didn't move immediately. She stood in the doorway of the module with her arm in the sling and looked at me with those copper dark eyes. And I had the clear and uncomplicated sense that she was deciding something. If the ceasefire holds, she said, the restorationist faction will require a human liaison at the Continuity Council, a formal one with standing and credentials. A pause. Someone the council can verify was present at the opening of this channel. Someone whose record indicates a certain quality of persistence. That sounds like a diplomatic posting, I said. It does, she agreed. I'm a medic. You are, she said. A great many things, Solon Adra. And then, for the first time since the surgical bay, I suspect I will be interested to discover what else. She went to sleep. I went back to my patients. In the morning, the jamming lifted. Comms came back online, and the first message I received confirmed that the suppression layer had dispersed overnight, cause unclear. The briefing I received 3 days later would characterize it as operational cessation of Valari tactical interference assets in the sector, which was the military's way of saying that someone on the Valari side had made a decision to stop. I had my suspicions about what had precipitated that decision. The second message was from Coalition Command, ceasefire framework, under active negotiation, preliminary halt to offensive operations, both sides, as of 006 local. I stood outside the module with a cold cup of something that had been optimistically labeled coffee in the supply manifest, and looked at the escarpment and breathed. The sky was the color of ordinary morning. The amber was gone. The escarpment was just rock, pale gold in the early light, with the particular quality that high stone has when the sun first reaches it, a warmth that looks like it has been waiting overnight and is only now being allowed out. I had not noticed that quality in the rock before. It's possible it had been there the whole time, and I had been too occupied with other things to see it. Pratt appeared at my shoulder. She said nothing, because she had the good sense to know when nothing was needed. We stood there for a while. Behind us I could hear the module's sounds, the faint beep of monitors, someone's quiet voice, the particular low-grade hum of medical equipment doing its work. Ordinary sounds. After the last 14 hours they felt remarkable, which is always the way with ordinary sounds, after extraordinary hours. Captain, she said eventually. Yeah, all 38 patients. Yeah, plus her, I said. Nodded, slowly, the way someone nods when they are filing a fact away somewhere important. Not for later use, exactly, but for safekeeping. That's a good day's work, she said. I drank my optimistic coffee. Teresa was asleep for another 4 hours, which was exactly what I had prescribed, and what she had needed. And when she woke, she found me in the adjacent bay, reassessing the pelvis fracture. She stood in the doorway and watched me work for a moment before she spoke. The ceasefire framework has been accepted by 3 of the 5 restorationist caucus bloc leaders, she said. Morning to you too, I said. A very brief pause. Morning, Solon. The corner of her mouth moved in a way that was not quite a smile, but was something in the neighborhood of one. The other 2 are persuadable, I believe, given time. How much time do you need? Months, she said. Perhaps a year. She looked at her arm in the sling. The war faction will not accept this quietly. There will be proceedings, as I said. And the transmission key? Already delivered to Coalition Command and authenticated. That part cannot be undone. She said it with a flat satisfaction that I recognized as the satisfaction of someone who has completed the thing they came to do, regardless of the cost. Whatever happens to me now, the channel is open. I finished the dressing and checked the sergeant's vitals and stood up. Then it was worth it, I said. She looked at me for a long moment. The same quality in her eyes as the night before. The measuring that had become something other than assessment. Trying to understand something that had interrupted a pattern she had grown accustomed to. Yes, she said quietly. It was.